Welcome everyone to our weekly session on Sefer Higayon by the saintly Reb Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. As is our custom, we like to give an orientation because in these svarim, which have a lot of categories and subcategories, it's quite easy to get lost. So what I've done here is I tried to make the smallest chart possible of the Sefer so that we can see an overview of the Sefer, so we get into each individual part when we know where we're holding. The Sefer Higayon is divided into three parts. The first part, which we've discussed already, is the part which he calls Asik Higayon, and that tells us what Higayon deals with. And basically what it deals with is concepts, and these concepts, the Ramchal explained, are either tangible concepts that we see in reality, or mental concepts we call muskalim, which the mind creates. For instance, he said there's the lion, which is what we see in Muchash from our senses, but the animal does not exist. Animal is a concept that the mind creates from seeing many animals. So the first thing is that he defined the various types of concepts there are, and we discussed all their subcategories. Then he explained to us that the concepts themselves are either what we maybe he calls etzem, or primary concepts, or variable concepts, things that happen, which he calls mikrim, things that happen to concepts. So I could talk about Moshe, and I could say that he is reading a book, so that's a mikra, or he's standing or he's sitting. So standing and sitting is what he's doing, the variables of what he's doing, but it's not him himself. That's not the etzem. It's an action to the ed that we attach to the etzem. And that was, he divided that into 10 different types of mikrim. You have the substance itself, and then you have, 9 different types of mikrim, what the variations that subject can do. And finally, which is, he discusses what we really want to do. In the beginning of the book, he says the idea of logic is to put everything in its true place. And in order to do that, we have to understand it itself and its local composite, and how it fits in to the general class of things. So if you look at what the Ramchal does right here in front of you, when he took the topic of logic, he divided it into its 3 basic parts and then into its subdivisions, and therefore we see the relationship of each little prat detail to the larger logic tree, and that's really what he wants to do, and that's really what he needs these etzem and mikra concepts to do. So that's what we've accomplished up to this point. Then the Ramchal tells us that as far as logic itself, he has to do 3 things which relate to the 3 activities of the mind, which is to explain terms, or shemot, and then to build statements from them, and then to build syllogisms from those statements. After you explain, and that's the essence of the book, you'll see that's chapter 4 through 22. That's the real guts of this book. Those of you that were with us for Sefer Derek Tfunos will recognize many of these terms. They're really, a lot of them are the same discussion that we had in Tfunos, but he organizes them and goes into a little more detail in each part, especially in the part of Shemot, which we'll be discussing. And finally, he tells us the order of analysis, which is called Seder. How do you logically approach a topic and divide it into its parts and its subcategories, and what are the laws of those categories and subcategories? So it's a very exciting sefer. It has a lot of detail in it, but as I mentioned many times, each detail is very, very understood, and the greatness of the Ramchal is his ability to define a very complex topic and order it, and that's really what he wants to do in everything that he studies. So let's go to the Sefer itself. Chapter 4, he tells us the following. Ad heina ba'arnu asek higayon. Up to this point, we discussed what does the topic of logic deal with, and it deals with conception, and we just mentioned all the various levels of perception. But now we're going to divide the subject of higayon, or to logic, into its parts. The h06. The Ramchal defines three basic parts in his discussion of higayon. Harishon is Be'er Hashemos, to explain terms. The second, Hasheni, is Be'er Hamamarim. Then we're going to use those terms, add them together, and make sentences. And the third one is Hikation. He's going to explain the various types of syllogisms. And that will be his complete discussion. That's the body, as we said in the book. Now, he gives an explanation. Parasho. Kipulas haseichel shlosha. There's three activities that the mind does. Harishon is hasagas hanosim hanizdamim lefanav kamoshim izdamnim. The first is to label the objects that we find in front of us. Like Adam Rishon gave names to everything. Derech mashal, ha'even, ha'etz, ha'barzel. So we have to define elements in reality and give them names. Hasheni. After we've defined the elements in reality, then we do what's called chaber el nosei mashi chuyev o yishula mimenu ad shivbona mizeh hamaymer. Then we start adding or subtracting to the subjects that we're talking about, and we create statements. Derech mashal. For instance, ha'etz hu gadol. So chiyev hagodel el ha'etz. We have the eights, which we've defined, and now we're going to say something about it. We're going to say that it's large. Hanir has in a lovan, or we could do a shlila. We can subtract something from an item that we've identified. For instance, in this case, we say the paper. The paper is not white. Okay, so we denied or subtracted whiteness from the paper, and that was our statement. The third activity is called making hikation or syllogisms. Hashlishi hu chaber marma el marma. We're going to attach one statement to the next. V'holid mehem shlishi, and we're going to give birth to a third statement, which we call a tolada. For instance, Adam hu bal chai. Man is a animal. A Ruvain hu Adam. Ruvain is a man, and therefore in Cain we come to the new statement, which was not stated in the first two, but we built from the first two that in Cain hu balchai, that Ruvain is a animal. Now he explains that l'pula harishon nishtamish min hashemos. The first activity, which is labeling items in reality, uses shemot. We're going to say terms. The second activity, building statements, hasheni min hamamarim. What it uses in order to put those subjects and say things about them, positively, negatively, it uses the statement. And the third one, building statements together, uses the process of hekesh. By putting two statements together, we can produce other statements. Now, he's now going to tell us and describe the various types of terms. So let's look at our chart again, just not to get lost. Here, if you notice, in just a slightly different organization, here's our three parts of higayon, three parts of thinking. We have to explain statements, which terms, and then build statements, and then do hekeshim. Now he's going to explain statements. He's going to divide the statements into their denotation and what they connote in context. Okay, so their simple meaning, which is going to call Lifi Harasan, what these labels refer to, and then we're going to talk about how these labels are used in common speech or in technical jargon. Okay, so what we're going to do now is the first part. We're going to talk about the basic ways that these labels are used, which he calls shemot or terms. And he's going to divide them into three parts. He's going to talk about certain shemot or terms are unequivocal. For instance, if I talk about Yerushalayim, that's going to be the referent of Yerushalayim is only the city that I happen to be living in now. Although you might say that there's other cities in the States or other places in the world that copied that name, but that's when we refer to Yerushalayim, let's say in the Tanakh, we all know what we're talking about. It's only one referent. That's called miyuchad. Then there's synonymous terms, where we'll use our famous Mishnah, which we've been analyzing throughout these various svarim in Baba Kama. The Mishnah talks about 4 types of damages: shor, mava, and heather. And heather, it says lo zevzesheshim ruchaim karya eish shein bo ruchaim. So heather and eish are near duf. They're synonymous terms. Okay. Now, then he's going to talk about mishutaf, homonyms, which means that the same term can be applied to various items. So you can say, for instance, man, you could say Ruvain is a man, and that would be a term that was equally applicable to Shimon or Levi or any other person. And he goes through these different types of labels which are using the same term to refer to different objects. Okay, that's a broad overview. We'll refer back to the chart as we go through the Sefer, and as I said many times, if you don't have this type of chart, it's very easy to get lost in all the detail. Each detail is understood, but it also has to be understood in context of the Ramchal's explanation. So now let's go to the Sefer itself. We'll be doing this first part, and then we'll go to the second part and bring back the chart Besut Hashem. Okay, so remember, we have the Ramchal. Let me just close that and go back there. There we go. And go to, here we are. Okay, so here's the term. Hashem humora av echad mi ha'atzamim o echad min ha'mikrim. A term can be either an etzim term, like the tree, or it could be a mikra term, like the tree is growing in a horizontal plane. It's growing straight. A vertical plane, growing straight up. Okay, so the etzim is just the name we're going to give to it. The shem is the name we're going to give to any etzim or mikra. V'yischalek lefi horoso ulefi inyono. We're going to divide it, says the Ramchal, into 2 parts. What the name denotes, what it tells us, and then we're going to say what it means in certain context. Lefi inyono, what it refers to in a contextual way. Like we said, there's going to be certain technical language that we use in higayon, this technical language that we use in every type of trade. So that will be lefi inyono. We're going to have special expert terms, so to speak. Okay, let's go to the first part. What different types of terms are they? So he says, Lefi harasol yichalak l'shlosha. There's the miyuchad, the nirdaf, and the mishutaf. Okay, here they are. The miyuchad, the nirdaf, and the mishutaf. Okay. Let's see how the Ramchal defines them. He says, Perishon, Ki yesh min hashemot shiora al inyan b'derech peshut. There's certain terms that refer to items in their simple way. V'yesh shiora b'derech dimyon. There's other ways that we use names, we label things, and we give it a name because of some comparison that it has to something else. That's going to be like a fiery man. V'yesh shiora b'derech haskama. There's also a group of people that may use terms in a special way, like any scientific field or any malacha, any craft will have its own language. But he'll explain that as the chapter goes on. And we'll see how they relate in their simple manner. Excuse me, this is where he talks about the contextual way of speaking. Okay, the first way was the Peshat way, that means what they denote, and the second way is in context, like their technical terms. As I'm going to explain. So let's go down the first part of the logic tree. What do terms connote? He's going to divide the terms into three basic parts. Here they are: miyuchad, nirdof, and mishutaf. Hamiyuchad hu shehu levado mor al inyan echad levad. The miyuchad is a name or a term that's given to only one item in reality. And therefore, we know very clearly that one item has a peculiar name, like Yerushalayim in the Tanakh only refers to the city of Yerushalayim here. Hanirdaf hu sheyeh shemos rabim morim al inyan echad kol echad mehem nikra nirdaf. We have the second type where you have a lot of different names that are given to one item. So each one of those names is called a nirdaf. We call them synonyms. As we said, you can Aish and Heather is a synonymous term. Here's his examples. Mashal HaMiyuchad, Shem Etzem, Kagon Avram Moshe Yerushalayim. The Miyuchad is a name that refers to only one item in reality. Tanakh, Avram, Moshe, and Yerushalayim refer to those specific people or places. Or Shem Miyuchas, Kagon Ivri Mitzri, doesn't have to be a simple name like Avram Moshe Yerushalayim. It could be a relative name like a Jew or a Egyptian, but that only refers to one people. Or Shem Nispa, Echad, or Shnaim, if I say that there's Arba Avos Nezikim, so that's peculiar to those four items. Now, what is a nirdaf? Nirdaf means those are different names, synonymous names for the same thing, like Lechem or Paso, we said in the Mishnah, like Heather and Aish. What's the Mishutaf? The Mishutaf, the third category, Hu Shem Echad Shemor al Inyanim Rabim U Mischalek Shnayim. It's one name that's given to a whole group of things. And there he's going to divide that into the Mishutaf or the Mit Yaches. Let's see how he defines the Mishutaf. The Mishutaf Muchlat Hu Mora al Shnei Inyanim She'en B'neihem Shum Yachas V'dimyon. Derech Mashal. Saf Shirotz Lomar Kli V'rotz Lomar Mezuzah. So the Mishutaf is a name that's given to two separate items, and even though they sound the same. The homonyms, they sound the same, but the item, the referent that they refer to are two different things. So we're labeling two different items in reality. I'm sorry, that's incorrect. Shamor al shnei inyanim she'ein b'neihem shum yachas v'dinyan. That's correct. There's two items that don't have any relationship. For instance, the saf. The saf is the doorpost. Sherotz lomar kli, v'rotz lomar mezuzah. A saf is a doorpost, a mezuzah, and is a certain type of implement. So it has the same. It has the same. It's the same name. That it's really a homonym, but its referent is two different things.
I think the word saf shows up in Tanakh. It's in Yirmiyah.
What is it?
It shows up in Tanakh, and it depends where in Tanakh. In one place it means mezuzah, one place it means kli.
Oh, it just means a kli. Okay.
But it depends where. It depends where. In one pasuk in Tanakh, I could find it again. I found it last week after this year. I did a
very good. So it's the word saf can refer to a kli, and it can refer to a doorpost.
Right.
So it's the same word, but it has two different referents, and there's really no connection between those two references, right?
Right. There's
no connection at all. Just so it happens the same sound. We call that a homonym. Is that right?
Yep.
It just sounds the same. Or we said red and red. You know, the color red sounds just like the verb to read, and he read in the past tense. But they have no connection one with the other.
Right.
Okay, so that's called, it's mishutaf muchlat. Muchlat in his language means that there's no relationship. There's no relationship from one thing to the next. Okay, so that's the word saf. But there's another type of mishutaf which he says mityache, shemar al shnei inyanim sheyesh b'neihem eze yachas v'dimyon. The second part is a name that will give to two or more items, but there is a relationship between the items and that name we're giving to it. The Yitzchak La'arba is going to identify four types. He's going to call it the kolel, the mushal, the mutak, and the muda. Let's see how he describes those things. When we talk about a shem, hu shem shiora al inyanim rabim kol echad mehem re'ui lehem et hashem kamosh re'u lechavaro b'shaveh. It's a term that we're going to apply to one object and to another object. And we're going to say that this term equally applies to object A as it does to object B. Shemitzad hiyoso kulam inyanim mishor shechad, since they come from the same root, v'hainu, what does that mean? Minim shetachas hasil, they are types under a category, or ishim tachas hamin, or they're particulars under a type. So they'll all have the same name applied to it. So even though they're different objects, that since they belong to the same category, they can be called by that categorical name. For instance, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, kol echad mehem yukora adam, mipnei hiyosam ishi mimin adam, v'nikra shem adam shem kolel. So we say that Reuven, Shimon, and Levi were particular people. Each of them can be also called man. Why? Because they are particulars in the species of man. So that's what we call the shem kolel. Anytime that we have a categorical name, so each person in that category has the qualities of that category. Okay, so we said, for instance, in our favorite Gemara of Nezikin, to call Shor Bor Maven Hever Nezek, each one is called a Nezek. There's Shor Hamazik, or Hamazik, Shor Hamazik, there's Bor Hamazik, there's Hever Hamazik, there's Mava Hamazik, because they're all in the category of Nezikin. Okay, so we could apply that name, the Shem Kolel, to each one of them. What about a mushal? Hu Shem Shior al Inyan Echad Bahora Rishona Val Inyan Acher Bahora Shniya. This is primary and secondary meanings of the same word. Mipnei means that it has a primary meaning. It's a Shem Shahora al Inyan Echad Bahora Rishona, the primary meaning. Val Inyan Acher Bahora Shniya, but it has a secondary meaning. Mipnei Sheyesh Lo Dimin Ma Im Ha'inyan Harishon, because of some comparison to the first name. Perishon. Haro Rishona Nikres Mashim Shtamish Me Hamila B'Lashon Alarov. There's what he calls the primary meaning or name of an item is that name that is used most of the time. What's the Haroshniya? Secondary meaning. Mashim Shtamish Mimeno Lifamim. It's a secondary meaning of the word that's sometimes used. Derech Mashal. Eish. The primary meaning of Eish, Harori Shona Shalo, Hi al Etzem Hasoref Hayadua. The primary meaning of Eish, fire, is the burning substance that we all know. Bahara Shniya Yor al Mi Shehu Mahir Harbe B'Tnuasav Eino Shoke. But it has a secondary meaning. We can say that a person is fire. That means that he is very quick and moves very quickly. He's never settled down. Okay. Nikrehu eish ledimion sheyesh lo im ha'eish emiti. So it's called the person is called fiery, or he's real fire, because of some comparison he has to the real item. He's a person never settles down, he's always moving. So you call him, wow, this man is fire. Okay, so you apply the word eish to him as a mushal. Okay. The next one is mutak, which is a variation of the mushal. The mutak hu shem shiora al shnei inyanim b'shaveh mipnei dimyon b'neihem. Here, it's a name that applies equally to the different items have the same name because of a very strong comparison between them. Ad shelo nocha lomar al shem echad mehem yoso haros shniyabo. Until you can't really determine what's the primary and secondary meaning. Perisho, shekfa nohugu kamo ken b'loshen shiora al shnei yamin b'shaveh. It's coming to the language so common that there is no primary and secondary meaning. It's very important for us when we analyze Pesukim or any lashon in the Gemara. We have to understand if there's primary and secondary meaning, so we would expect the primary meaning to be made. However, we can always say that it's been used in a secondary sense. Okay, so we have to be very careful about what we call things and make sure that they're used in their primary sense. But here, it's come into language that there's no difference between primary and secondary meaning. What does he mean? Perisho. Shikfa nogu kamo kain b'loshen shiora al shnei minim b'shaveh. This, even though there may have been a primary meaning and a secondary meaning at one point, the custom now in the language is to use this same word for two different items and speak of them as the primary meaning. For instance, he gives an instance in Hebrew, the word geder. Geder. Simple meaning of the word geder means a fence. Kach yuvon al ha-geder ha-binyani ha-sui saviv ha-sodot. The geder, in its simple form, is that a picket fence or any other type of fence that we put around a field. Kamosh yuvan al bir hasholem v'tzior hamiti etzel ha'hiyoni. However, there is just an equal use of the word geder when people want to describe a complete, true picture, mental picture of something. You say, what is the definition of something? Even in Hebrew, in English, the word define means to define an element, but in Hebrew, the same word geder is used, fence, to fence in a concept, so to give it a definition. So we see that there's no, if the word geder in this case is used, no one's going to say that there's a primary meaning and secondary meaning, because in that context, whether it be physical, the primary meaning is fence, and this meaning in as a logical term, meaning definition, is just as equally apparent. So even though it originally meant, let's say historically, it was used to mean fence, but in the field of logic already we use it to mean a definition. V'chein hem kol hashemos hadiktuk v'higayon v'shar hachachmos. You see, all these words that have been borrowed to explain grammar or logic or any other wisdom, computer language, you know, like we mentioned enter and shift on a keyboard, capsules, all these things that enter means to go into a room. We say no, enter is a real noun. Of course, if we're talking in terms of computering, we know that the keyboard enter doesn't mean to go into a room, it means to enter information. Okay, so all that's called it's transferred from its original meaning into its new field, and no one has any doubt what it means. When we say there's I was in the shore ball Marvin Header, so we speak already in the world of Talmud. We know that shore is Kavan Lahazik, and Header is referring to Aish, and it has we know it has what qualities. So don't be using it in its technical sense as Mahazik. Shore has, we say, it has Karen Shane Regal, for instance. So we don't really mean Karen on Mahazik. So when you speak about Karen, we mean Karen. We don't talk about the horn already. We know in the field of Nizik, and that we mean Kavan Lahazik. So there's no more in this new field. We've taken the original term and we've transported it into the new field, and there's no question about what we're talking about now in the new field. Although someone who's not in the field may be quite confused about it, because if you say shore is not like a bore, and someone doesn't know you're talking about Nazikin, he'll think you're a little odd, because it's obviously the Knox, not like a pit. But obviously we're using it in the technical sense. We're talking, those people who are in the Talmud know what we're talking about. Okay, so that's what he says. So he says, V'chein hem kol shemos hadiktuk v'higayon v'shar chachmos. That's the way it goes in logic and in grammar logic and all other sciences and wisdoms. Shalaku shemos levar mishpatehem mitzad hadimyon asher lehem ima she'torenu hamilos b'haros v'shonim. In all these fields, they take words and move it into the new fields because of a certain comparison it has to the new field that it's in from the old field that it was. So you said, you talk about a key being an enter key. Well, it enters information. That's used, the word enter was used because it has a similar meaning to entering into a room. So it was borrowed, and now it's Mutak, it's moved over to the new field. Okay, that's his discussion of words, Lefi. Oops, I'm sorry, there's one more called the Muda. I forgot the famous Muda. Muda hu shem nema al Rabbi b'shava u v'yichud al echad. It's a name that applies to many, many things, but it applies to one item especially. Lios inyanahu chazakbo me'acherim, because this item is so classically has that characteristic. And we know what we're referring to, even though we're using a categorical name, but we know who we're referring to. Shakavana v'shem hahu al inyan hapratiyahu, because the kavana is to speak about a certain particular, not a general. For instance, Derek Mashal, when we say Hagibor, Stam, Yomal Shimshon. So if we just say Hagibor, everybody knows, and we're talking about the world of Tanakh, that we're talking about Shimshon. The word Gibor can be talking about a lot of powerful people. But since he is outstanding in that quality, we refer to him as the Gibor. Or the Mishor, who is the singer in Tanakh? Nemal David. So everybody knows the Mishor is the songster. There's a lot of people that make beautiful songs and poems, but David Melech is called the singer, because he's so outstanding in that character trait. So that's where we take a particular name that really refers to a class. We say, and it's become associated with someone who was a master of that class. We used to, in Yeshiva, we used to talk about the Rebbe, and people would say, we refer to our Rosh Yeshiva as the Rebbe. So, to us, that was moved out of Kovel. Okay, so that's our first half of the discussion of terms. Lufi Parasan talked about the Yucca terms like Yerushalayim, Yirdaf, synonymous terms. We said in the Gemara and the Mishnah, we have Haber, Ish, then we talked about the Shutaf, we said where they have no relationship to each other, like the word Satsni exclusively, Satsni mezuzah. There's no real relationship between those two sounds, but you read, and then we said that the same term can be applied to many things, even because it's a Shem Kolel. So we said that Shimon, Reuben, and Levi are all called men because they're men in that class, or Musha. There's no real difference, like saying the enter key, saying enter, meaning press the enter key and enter coming in. And Muda, finally, like Shimshon, the certain people who are so well known as exemplars of a certain field that when we talk about the songs, the singer, or the Gibor in the Tanakh, we always know who we're referring to, even though that name could equally be applicable to many other items. Now, this is a very important little discussion because we'll see, for instance, in our Gemara, when it says there's Arba Avos Nezikin, the word Av, the primary use of the word Av is really a Mu'utak word, right? In other words, there's an Abba, which is any person that has a child, a physical father. But then in the world of logic, a Av means that there's Toldot. Really, an Av is a categorical case that's going to be able to produce similar cases with the same din. So the Gemara says, since the Mishnah uses the word Av, we know that there must be Toldos. It doesn't mean physical children, it means logical children. But yet later on in the Gemara, the Rav Oshia, Chia, they bring a whole list and they say that there's 21 hours or 24, I forgot. There's 16 or or 21 avos, and they include avos that don't have any children, like all the shomrim or motzi shemra. So the Gemara says, wait a minute, the term av means toldos. How come that term is being used here? So they said, there's a secondary meaning of the word av, and that means things that are mentioned in the Torah. That's called an av also. The Torah is the daddy. So we can call it, not that it has toldos, but we talk about these are 21 nezikin that are mentioned in the daddy. Who's the daddy? The chumash. So that's a secondary use of the word. Okay, so these use of shemot are very, very important for us. We expect everything to be used in its primary meaning, but we know that language can be used in secondary senses. Like we say that Hashem put his hand in Mitzrayim. We know there's metaphorical uses of language. Not everything is meant in its pashut way. So that's his little discussion of words according to their hora. Now he's going to talk about words in context, contextual meaning, and specifically the words that are used in higayon. And he's going to define them for us. So let's get back to that. So he says, now, shemos lefi inyanam, hanirmazim bam yischalaku leshnayim. Words according to what they connote, the connotations of words, there's two types. He says there's diburim and there's limudim. What are diburim? Hem hamishtamshim ledibur. Those are the primary uses of words in language. But the limudim hem hamiyuchadim l'chachmos o malachos shal yudehem migim letachlis hamkavan b'chachmos o malachos hahem v'hem chaf beis minim kamo hachachmos v'hamalachos. So there's the common use of language, and then there's the technical use of language. And he says the limudim are specific languages used in various different forms of wisdom or crafts. And by these particular words, these key words, we are able to do or understand the wisdom or the particular craft. And he defines 22 different types of wisdoms, which I don't know which ones they are. I'm sure there's a classical list of 22. Now maybe in universities and modern sciences there may be much more. As I mentioned, he says that this is, his whole book is coming from his logical understanding. This is not Torah Moshe Sinai. If you happen to find more Chachmas and Malachas, then he describes Matov. But anyway, it's very important to know that language has certain connotations within the fields, within technical fields. Now, here is where he wants to get in his discussion. In order to do the process of logic, he says, the hashemos hanishtamshim lehigayon hem echad ve'esri ve'elohem. There are 21 logical terms with which the logician gets to his goal, which is defined by the Ramchal as being able to define the object in its proper place and hierarchy. And this is going to be the body of his work, of course, because he wants to explain these tools that the logician uses in order to do his analyzation. And what are they? There's and they come in pairs. One has 3 terms, but they come in units, so in groups. There's the sibed and the mesubav, the cause and the result. There's the no saying and the skaber, the subject and the predicate, the kol and the chelek, the whole and its parts, the gezer, the nigzar, the etymologic root of words and what comes out of that etymology. Then there's the getter and the nigdar, the definition and what is defined. The binyan, the nivne, that's the construct and the conjugate. Like in Hebrew, you take a root and you can build from that root a whole group of items, whether they be nouns or verbs. There's the chiluk and then the chalek. There's the distinction and what is distinguished. And there's the ne'arach and bilti shavim and hefchim. There's terms which are equal, unequal, and are opposite. And then there's edus nuan, terms of testimony and things which are given testimony about. And finally, subimin. So these are the 21 terms that he's going to go into very great detail to explain. Perisho. Ki elu hem hashemo shebehen negila tachas hamakuvan b'giyayom. With these 21 terms, we're going to get to the goal of logic, which is what? Shehu l'das hadavorim la'emitam b'chol habechinot sheyesh la'avchin behem. The goal is to analyze items in reality and to understand them in truth, to know them in truth, according to all their various aspects. So if we're discussing a halacha, we're going to have to know what's the sivas of the chiyuv. We're going to have to know what the various parts of any halacha is, like it is arba'as and zikin. We're going to have to know the definition of the shore and the bore and the mav and the hever, that they're kavana lahazik or they're hanor lahazik. We're going to have to know the various differences, lo hari ashor, kahari amava, lo hari mava, kahari ashor. We're going to have to distinguish between different types of mazikin, and we're going to have to say, well, the tola is really similar to the av, but the shore is not similar to the bore, or we may even come to the one item is the opposite of the total opposite of another one. Okay, and of course, edus and muad, we're going to say if there was edus on a shore one time, chetzi nezek, 3 times will be nezek shalom, and then we'll have to make a categorical classes of things. What's the there's arba avos, and they have the subcategories, and what do those subcategories entail. So we're going to use these terms to do our analysis, and Be'ezrat Hashem, our goal here is not only to understand these terms abstractly, but to use those terms and to apply them. So the homework, so to speak, for this week really is to think about what he said about terms, and I'll bring examples as I brought from the Gemara, from the Mishnah in Zikin, first Mishnah, Babakama. Bring examples, make it alive, and by using these terms, again, we're going to clarify what we're saying, and we're going to also develop a common language. We don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time. If we say that the word avot being used in our Mishnah and Reb Chia have primary and secondary meaning, so we'll know what we're talking about. Okay, Perishel. Ki elu hem hashemos shebehem negil etachlis makuma. We said that we're going to use these 21 terms to get to where we want to get, which is to understand things in their various aspects. Okay, let's just do a little review. What we did today is we're investigating Chelkei Higayom, which is the second large body of his Sefer Higayom, and we discussed the first part, which is to explain various terms. Terminology, to understand that terms can be used in their absolute simple sense and in their complex sense. How did that come about? So we took that first box, the Ramchal, and he said, look, there's 2 types. We know that what words denote simply, and what words mean in context or what they connote in certain technical terms. Or even diburim, does the Torah speak the Lashon Hara or not? That's one of the big questions that we talk about. Does the Torah, we expect the Torah speaking very technically. Every term in the Torah is limudim, but sometimes the Torah speaks Lashon B'nei Adam, Lashon diburim. So he's described that as far as lahara, we have certain terms which only refer to one concept. So if you would never have a doubt in your mind if someone's talking about Yerushalayim in the Tanakh that is talking about the city of Yerushalayim. In America, if you lived in the Midwest or maybe in the South, maybe there's another city called, Jerusalem. So you have to be careful. But the easiest ones to handle usually are the miyuchad ones. But, the old joke, there's arba avos, someone reads there's 4 avos, and he says, wait a minute, there's 3 avos. So the word av is not being used here in its miyuchad sense. Okay, then there's synonymous terms, which is different sounding words for the same item. Okay, that he calls nirdav. And then there's different words completely for the same item. We said in our Mishnah, Aish and Hever. Okay, they're synonymous terms. They refer to Aish. And then we have Mishutaf, which means the same sounding word is used to describe the different items. Okay, so sometimes they have nothing to do with each other, like the word Safi said. The word Saf means a kli and it means a mezuzah. It sounds exactly the same. It's spelled the same, but it refers to 2 items. And the reason why both are called Saf have nothing to do with each other. And then he said, however, there are terms which sound alike and do have, even though they refer to different items, there's a reason why they're using the same term. The easiest one is kolel. Whenever every min in every type in a class has the same name, it's because it has the same kolel. So we said you talk about shor mazik, bor mazik, hever mazik, because they all can be called mazikin because they're in the category of mazik. And we said this, the mushal, like we take a primary word and we use it in its mushal sense and say he's a fiery person. Or the mutak, we said we borrow the term into a field and we lost what's called primary and secondary, like geder in Hebrew means definition as much as a physical fence, so we won't be confused if we're in either field. And then there's finally like the relatives. When we talk about Hamashora, even though there's many people who could be called poets or singers, the Tanakh refers to the one who's outstanding, which is the David HaMelech. And then he explained that words have meaning in context, their simple meaning, like Lashon B'nei Adam, and their technical meaning in whichever science or field of malacha that you're involved in. And at this point, he defines these 21 key terms in logic, which, as we said, is going to be the next section of the book and represent the body of his work. Okay, so we're going. If there's any questions, we'll take them. If not, we'll go on to our next study. Okay, any questions about this?
No, I think it's pretty clear.
Yeah.
Okay. What's only missing is practice. Okay. And application. And I would like to, at some point, do that with you. Take a Mishnah and let's see how these terms are being used in their primary sense, in the secondary sense, in their mushal sense, because only when you apply these terms and make them real do they have their full value. We all know them. We all knew the word synonym and a homonym, but we know it generally. And also when it comes to practice, like I said in the Mishnah, we don't use the term, so we have to reinvent the wheel all the time, either say it in a different language or talk around it and about it. So if we can key on it, I would love to have a class where you go through some Mishnayos, for instance, whether it be, it doesn't matter where, and just give me examples from various different parts as we, from wherever you take it, and how things are used in their primary, secondary, and what problems they have, and sometimes there's a problem with the determination, sometimes it's obvious, and by doing that hands-on activity, so this will become real to us, and also we'll be able to use it as an active tool, not just here today, on tomorrow. Okay, so let's say good evening to everyone, and we'll see you next week. Best wishes.